Welcome everyone to the fourth ALDA Talk. Thanks for being here with us today. I hope you are all fine in this difficult moment. But today we are going to talk about something different from the COVID-19. And today we will discuss about the Sustainable Development Goals and how we are all engaged with them. The SDGs are a call for action to fight poverty and inequality in accordance with the 2030 agenda. And these goals represent benchmarks for building up a better planet and a more sustainable future. That's why it's very important to have them in mind while we develop our projects and to identify the right targets. That's the reason why today we wanted to discuss about this topic. So today with us, we have the head of project management unit at ALDA, Sofia Caiolo, who will make the introduction. And then we have with us Antonio De Martin, project manager and representative of Santorso municipality. That is also one of our members and partners. Giulia Sostero, who is responsible for the Med area and the project manager at ALDA, and Ditta, who is ALDA project development officer. After this brief introduction, Sofia Caiolo will tell you more about the SDGs and will explain why we are all engaged with them. We will follow by describing two best practices that ALDA and its members had implemented. The first example will be given by Antonio, who will explain the SDG targets of the Beware project, which tackle the issue of environmental sustainability and climate change, while Giulia Sostero will present the Parfait project, which focuses instead on women's equal opportunities. And finally, Ditta will tell you more about the funding opportunities for the Sustainable Development Goals. In the end, we will give you the floor. If you have any questions, we will try to answer. So this is all from my side. I thank you for the attention. I hope you will enjoy this webinar, and please don't hesitate to get in contact with me if you have any question or if you want also to present a topic to discuss yourself. So I leave the floor to Sofia. Thank you.
Hello everyone, good morning. I hope you can all see my screen. So today, as Eva just said, I'm Sofia Caiolo, head of the project management unit of ALDA, and my role today is to provide you with a framework. So afterwards we will see, we will have two presentations about case studies with a specific focus on some SDG. But just to put you all on the same page and to have an overview of what are the Sustainable Development Goals, I will make this brief introduction. So where do we start? So first of all, I would like you to go back on time and to go at the beginning of this millennium, so in 2000, when 191 United Nations member states endorsed the UN Millennium Declaration. So in this UN Millennium Declaration, it was set up like 8 goals, 8 Millennium Development Goals were set up. And these goals were aimed to be achieved in 15 years by 2015. The geographical target were developing countries. And these goals were 8 different ones, quite specific. So we had, for instance, eradicate extreme poverty, achieve universal primary education, promote gender equality and empower women, reduce child mortality, improve maternal health, combat HIV, AIDS, malaria and other diseases, ensure environmental sustainability, and develop a global partnership for development. So in 2015, not all the goals were achieved 100%. However, this experiment of setting up goals and working towards them for 15 years appears to be really successful. So on the base of this, it was decided to set up a new agenda in 2015 after 2 years of negotiations. It was a much more broader agenda, holistic and comprehensive, which was endorsed by 193 United Nations member states. So this new agenda is the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The timeline was the same, so 15 years to reach this agenda. So the target day, let's say, is 2030. And while before we had 8 goals, here we have 17 and 169 targets. So it's much more broader. Another important point that we will come back later on this is that this agenda is not applying only to developing countries, but also to developed ones. So let's go a bit more in detail. So the Sustainable Development Goals. So as we said, we have 17 goals, 169 targets, and 232 indicators. This agenda is like all the goals can be divided in different dimensions that form a society, let's say. So there are economical challenges, social challenges, and environmental challenges. In the economical side, in the economical dimension, we can see, for instance, SDG 8, decent work and economic growth, SDG 9, industry, innovation and infrastructure, SDG 12, responsible consumption and production. So these goals were not like our new goals that were established for this agenda, but are not a follow-up from the MDGs. While in the social one, in the social dimension, we can see SDG 1, no poverty, SDG 2, zero hunger, SDG 4, quality education. And these are built on the previous MDGs. So we took back the MDGs and make a new agenda with incorporating them. However, if we focus, for instance, in SDG 4, quality education, we can see that it's a clear follow-up to the MDG, achieve universal primary education. However, once again, we can see here how this agenda is much more broader. If we go in details and you see the target of SDG 4, we can see that we have lifelong learning. So we have adult education taken into account, or education to sustainable development. While in the previous MDGs, we have just a focus on primary education. Another important feature of SDGs is their interconnection. So we always need to consider these 17 goals as not as a silos, but as a comprehensive picture that is always interlinked with the other. Indeed, we can see that the progress of one can bring progress to the others, but also some progress can compete to others. So we always need to see the whole picture of it. So where do we stand, or better, how do we monitor these SDGs? So of course, the SDGs were adopted in 2015, and they will last, we will have this agenda, these guidelines to be followed for 15 years, but it is really important to monitor them and to monitor the progress of the Sustainable Development Goals. The most relevant event for this and to keep track of the SDGs is the High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development, which is held every year in July in New York. This year we will see due to the situation, but this is the moment in which the international world make the point and see where we are, and in case revise some indicators and so on and so forth. This is what the global level. But if we go at the European level, of course, there are other institutions and organizations monitor the progress of the SDGs. For instance, here the picture with the arrow that you can see is Eurostat report that is due yearly, in which all the, like, you have the picture of how the European countries are progressing in SDGs. And then finally, of course, you also have a panoramic view of like, it is also important to monitor the SDGs at the national and regional level. So for instance, here I put the reference of Italy, as I'm Italian, so I'm more aware, but I'm sure that in all your countries there are some institutions that are monitoring the progress of the SDGs. So for instance, here we have ASBIS, which is the Alleanza Italiana per lo Sviluppo Sostenibile. And so it's important to monitor the process of this. Regarding this, so now 5 years have passed. So we can say that like, there have been some progress, but however, not enough. So the UN launched a call for action, which is called Decade of Action, in which they invite all to speed up the process and take always into account SDGs. Otherwise, it will, like, the agenda will not be reached. So in particular, they made 3 call for action, one directed to the global level, one to the local one, and one to people. So 3 fundamental features of SDGs which make them different from the MDGs are their universality. So as we were saying before, while the MDGs apply only to developing countries, the SDGs are applying to both developing and developed countries. So Europe is, of course, needs to work towards the SDGs, but also United States, Australia. So everyone is is involved in this process. Another point which always called the like, everyone needs to be on board is the multi-stakeholder approach. So it is believed that the SDGs and Agenda 2030 can be reached only if every actor in the societies will work towards them. So when we speak about every actor, we consider governments, NGOs, civil society, academia, private sector, and so on and so forth. So we all need to keep in mind all the actors and never work alone and work towards the agenda. The last point that is always related to this multi-stakeholder approach is not just actors, but also levels. So international level, national level, but also the local level, it's really crucial. And there is this process of localizing the SDGs, which means that communities at the local level, we should implement the SDGs. So for instance, here I put a link. I don't know if you can see it. I hope so. So this is an interesting link that I suggest you to have a look at. That is the Sustainable Development Goals, what local governments need to know. So if we go to one of the SDGs, we will see why does this particular SDG matter to local governments. It will make an explanation how the SDG is related to the local level. And then we will see what are the relevant targets for the local level. Okay, so as you know, ALDA is working on the local level, and how are we working to collaborate, to contribute to the Agenda 2030? So first of all, we have more than 50 projects active tackling different SDGs. And after my presentation, there will be the presentation of 2 of them, Beware and Parfait. So we implement local actions that work towards the SDGs and their targets. And on a European level, we are engaged in networks that work toward, like, for advocating for SDGs and for monitoring SDGs. In particular, we are part of SDG Watch Europe, which is an alliance of civil society organizations from different sectors, and Concord, which is a network of organizations working on sustainable development. So this is what ALDA does for the SDGs, but I would like, now what can you do for the SDGs? So now more than ever, we can see how our small actions, like staying at home, can really make the difference. And it's not just something that impacts ourselves, but also all our neighbors and all the people that live around us. And our small action on the local level can have an impact on a global level. And I think this is, like, in this tragic situation, we can really see the effect of our action. So the same thing, like very small action, you can, like, with very small action that you can do at your place, you can contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. So I put this quote that I think it's really relevant now, that is, every small action matters, because when 7 billion people do that thing, it changes the world. And I put here some guides that you can have a look at. So there are two guides that were produced during the Ladder project, which was a big project led by ALDA few years ago about raising awareness about the SDGs. So we create two toolkits, one for local authorities and one for individuals, that suggest some ways to be more sustainable. So on a local authority level, but also on an individual level. And then you have this, the Lazy Person's Guide to Saving the World, which is a guide done by the United Nations, which has 4 different levels, and you can do actions from your couch, from home, from outside, and from work. It's very, like, they are really small actions that I'm sure many of you already done, but it is important that we all pass the message also to other people, like recycling, use the bike and public transportation, shop locals, and so forth. So that's all from my side. My message is, let's make these global goals local actions. So I would invite you all to think about it and to see how you can contribute to the Agenda 2030. So we can go to Giulia Sostero, that will present the project outside Europe, so in Tunisia, Parfait. Giulia Sostero is the coordinator of the Med area of ALDA, and I will leave the floor to her.
Yeah. Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Giulia Sostero, and as Sofia presented me, I'm the Med coordinator for ALDA, the European Association for Local Democracy. It means that I'm managing all projects that are implemented in the Mediterranean area. And I'm going to present you today the SDG number 5, gender equality, and the Parfait project, which is centered around this SDG in particular. So the SDG number 5, I'd like to call it the SDG that rules them all, because it's not a particular and standalone goal, but it's a really transversal one that has to do with all the other SDGs. The description is achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. And you can see here down the symbol, which represents the symbols of Mars and Venus and the equality sign. So this goal is very important for many reasons, and I'd like to briefly remind that if this is still needed in 2020, it's because not enough has been done up to now. And despite international conventions being drafted, starting from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, a particular attention has to be given to women and girls, since their rights need a specific attention. and specific tools because they face more obstacles than men do, and they represent half of the world population. So according to the description in the UN website, gender equality is not only a fundamental human right, but a necessary foundation for a peaceful, prosperous, and sustainable world. So it's definitely something very important for all the SDGs. So some numbers to start. As you can see from the website of UN, all SDGs stand on a deep analysis of the situation at a global level, and you have many statistics indicating what's the current situation and what we aim to achieve. So what we know about gender equality is that 52 countries do not mention gender equality in their constitutions. On the positive side, all the others do. Then what we know is that 1 on 5 women have reported experiencing sexual violence by the partner in a 12-month period. So a huge number of women are still exposed to violence. We also know that 150 million girls will be married before the age of 18 by 2030, if we follow the current trend. All the SDGs, this SDG has to do with these 4 aspects in particular concerning gender equality, which are education, healthcare, decent work and representations, which are considered to be the most important topics to be tackled. And for this, the SDG has planned 6 targets to be reached by 2030. So let's see what are the targets of SDG number 5. 5.1, we can see about discrimination and all forms of discrimination against all women and girls everywhere. So you can see there's a different content for each specific target. The second one is about violence. Eliminate all forms of violence against all women and girls in the public and private spheres, including trafficking and sexual and other types of exploitation. 5.3, eliminate all harmful practices such as child, early and forced marriage and female genital mutilation. 5.4, recognize and value unpaid care and domestic work through the provision of public services, infrastructure and social protection policies, and the promotion of shared responsibility within the household and the family as nationally appropriate. 5.5, ensure women's full and effective participation and equal opportunities for leadership at all levels of decision-making in political, economic and public life. And finally, 5.6, ensure universal access to sexual and reproductive health and reproductive rights. These are the outcome targets, so the results that we are looking for when applying these SDGs at the global level. As I was saying, this SDG is really transversal, so you can see that in all the other description, most targets address women and men in this specific order. But in this SDG, we address the particular situation that regards women specifically, while for the rest, it's more a global approach to all humankind. Then we have the means of implementation targets, which indicate the concrete tools that we can use to reach these goals. So in 5.A, we talk about reforms. So undertake reforms that give women equal rights to economic resources, as well as access to ownership and control over land and other forms of poverty, financial services, inheritance, and natural resources in accordance with national laws. In the second, we talk about technology, in particular information and communication technology to promote the empowerment of women. And in the third, policies and enforceable legislation for the promotion of gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls at all levels. So I would like to focus in target 5.5, women's participation, because it's the target that the project Parfait directly relates to. So I will quickly repeat it: ensure women's full and effective participation and equal opportunities for leadership at all levels of decision-making in political, economic, and public life. For each specific target, the SDG set indicators. And for this target, we have the indicators of women occupying seats in national parliaments and local governments, and also women in managerial positions. So it's really important for us to look if with our action towards these targets, we actually made a change in these indicators. And we will see if we did something with the Parfait project. So the Parfait project, with this really modest name, which is in French and means the participation of women for the advancement and innovation of Tunisia, is a project that is ending actually next week and has been running since October 2017, so for 2.5 years, targeting 6 governorates in Tunisia, namely Tunis, the capital province, let's say, or region, Jendouba, Kairouan, Mahdia, Gafsa, and Kabylie. So you can see scattered all over Tunisia. ALDA is the lead applicant of this project in partnership with the European Partnership for Democracy, which also has a Tunisian branch, the LDA Local Democracy Agency Kairouan, in Kairouan, here where the star is, Coalition pour les Femmes de Tunisie, a feminist Tunisian association, and has been funded by the European Union in the framework of the Moussaouet program, which is a broad program that concerns equalities in Tunisia, also on the economic side, institutional side, and fight against violence. But in our case, we focused mostly on political participation. So the general objective of the Parfait project is to enhance women's participation in local governance in Tunisia. Specifically, to contribute women's and women's groups' participation in decision-making in the 6 regions we targeted, also foster the integration of gender dimension by local authorities in their actions, and promote a shared vision of the place of women in public life. How did we do that? So the project was composed by 4 activity groups. The first one concerned mostly the reinforcement of skills and coaching for women in the participation to local life, being aware that working on gender is a multifaceted work that needs to target specifically many different stakeholders. In this particular group, so we focused on the women themselves and on women's groups. So we identified the beneficiaries, and then we had a cycle of trainings and workshops on particular skills that are needed to participate in public life, namely self-confidence, leadership, participatory democracy, the electoral cycle, project cycle management. So our beneficiaries were women who were already active in public life, but also women that wanted to approach public life, and also more importantly, women who wanted to candidate to the municipal elections in May 2018, which were the first ever municipal elections in Tunisia. In the second activity group, we targeted a group of different stakeholders, specifically citizens, civil society, and local authorities together, to understand and study which are the issues locally that concern gender equality and how we can work on them. So we worked on raising awareness on civic participation and on the integration of gender dimension in local affairs in these local authorities. And then we also organized 2 campaigns. One was for media against gender stereotypes and how women are treated in the media in Tunisia. And the other one was an awareness track that went around Tunisia, literally driving around Tunisia, to invite people to vote and participate in the elections, specifically women, because we could see from the statistics that women tend to vote less and to access less to this right, because it's also a bit complicated to register to vote. So the point of this campaign was to let people understand how we can do it and to convince women that their vote has a weight and they should access to this right. Concerning group 3, it was a more specific study on the dialogue process among diverse actors at the local level. So facilitators have been trained to facilitate tables of discussion among local authorities, CSOs, and citizens to evaluate the issues and then draft action plans that we followed in the activity group 4, which was a sub-granting scheme. It means that within the project, we allocated 23 micro project inside our bigger project for local associations to manage their own project targeting gender dimension in their local context. So what did we achieve with this? We managed to train 147 women on the topics I mentioned before, so leadership, self-confidence, electoral cycle, and local democracy and citizen participation in all the 6 governorates. We sub-granting 23 projects that were active from May 2019 to March 2020, which reached even more, I can say around 10,000 people. And 9 among the 20 women that we trained to be elected got elected as presidents of members of municipal commissions. We saw that from the first ever elections in Tunisia at the municipal level, the percentage of women being represented was amazingly good if we compare it to other countries, because 47% of local officials are women. And we are proud to say that these 9 women have followed our cycle of trainings and workshops, not only for them as persons, because they got some new skills that were useful for them, for example, to organize their campaign and to address citizens, but also because they got technical skills such as presenting an electoral list that were really useful for them to respect the laws and regulations that are set in Tunisia. So this is the part that Parfait project did in Tunisia. Is not about changing the whole nation, but it's about making a change at the local level and giving to people skills that are useful for them to take their own place, to make their voice heard, and to make their own small change. So thank you. Here you have my contact if you have any question concerning this project or SDG 5, and maybe we can also have some time at the end of the presentation. So if my colleague Antonio is ready, maybe I can leave the floor to him.
Okay, I'll start my presentation with a quote, which is "No water, no life, no blue and no green." This is a quote by a famous author, explorer, and teacher, and it stresses, I put it here because it stresses the importance of water as a source of life, as an essential source for everything, for any human activities. And of course, water is all of this, but what I will be trying to discuss today is the fact that water sometimes, under certain specific circumstances, can also be a danger, can also be a threat, can also cause damages. I will be presenting the Life Beware project, and I will be talking about rainwater natural management and a green and resilient territory, how we can operate to manage rainwater naturally, and how can we contribute to create a green and resilient territory. The Beware project is a project which has been co-financed by the LIFE program, and I will be trying to show how what we do as a consortium, as partners that daily work on the project, contributes to the achievement of certain sustainable development goals. I will start by focusing on 3 specific sustainable development goals that are addressed by the project. I will then try to show how the project works in line with what United Cities and Local Governments Organization promotes, which is to somehow for local initiatives to influence higher levels, so the regional, the European, the global level. I will then pass to present, illustrate the Life Beware project, more specifically what we do, why we do it, how we do it, and of course how we try our best to contribute to achieve certain sustainable development goals. I'll be talking in a second. The final part, which I'm not going to be able to go over, is about indicators, and it's a bit more specific and technical, and I thought it could be interesting to put it in the presentation for you to consult it if you would be interested to do that. So it's a sort of appendix. So climate change, we all know, and we wouldn't be here if we didn't, that climate change is occurring today at a much higher rate and than expected, and with much more consequential effects than we expected as well. Some of these consequences have to do with hazards, with natural disasters. We're talking about floods and droughts, for example, with losses in persons and economic losses, of course. And we'll also be talking today about how, in this very context, we can work on water management and protection of ecosystems. So among the 17 different sustainable development goals, 3 specific goals have to do with these issues I mentioned earlier. So number 13, climate action, number 11, sustainable cities and communities, and number 6, clean water and sanitation. In particular, SDG 13 deals directly with the issue of climate change, and it claims that we have to take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. In line with some of its targets, the Beware project is working to strengthen resilience and the adaptive capacity to climate change related events like hazards and natural disasters. It is also working on integrating virtuous measures into the national, local and national policies, planning, strategies, and it is also very committed in the improvement of the awareness of education towards climate change, and also in building up capacity in terms of response to climate change events, in terms of mitigation, in terms of reduction of their impact and adaptation itself. By working on these issues, we also, of course, work to make cities and human settlements more safe, resilient, and sustainable. So we address some other specific targets that are part of the SDG number 11, and in particular, those who deal with sustainable urbanization, so the consumption of soil, so to speak. It's the effects of natural disasters and how to reduce them, and how to implement policies, measures, rules to reduce risk reduction. We do this so by working on risk mitigation and resilient cities. We specifically work on water. And so we contribute, we do our best at least to contribute to the achievement of SDGs 6, and in particular on the achievement of sustainable management of water. By working, as I will show you in a few minutes, we try to improve water quality, with the efficient use of water as well, to protect and somehow restore ecosystems, and also with the activation of a very wide participatory process to strengthen the participation of the communities of people, of citizens, in improving water management. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, the Life Beware project very much works in line with what UCLG does, United Cities and Local Governments, a network of local and regional governments that work to ensure that what we do locally is taken into consideration by the global agenda. In the same way, the Beware project works locally to elaborate and promote a global strategy. That's our final and most important goal for adaptation to flooding risk, or at least we contribute, we hope, and we are aiming to contribute to this. How do we do it? Okay, let's get into the specifics. We have one main objective, which is to improve the hydraulic safety and resilience of the territory, essentially by promoting knowledge and by spreading knowledge and by promoting and facilitating the adoption of sustainable intervention that we call the natural water retention measure, which are measures that contribute to increase the infiltration and storage capacity of urban and rural areas. We are inspired by a principle which is quite straightforward, but also quite strong in our opinion, which is the fact that we believe that the widespread diffusion, the widespread presence of these interventions in the territory can generate even more significant hydrologic results than big construction projects. So we have, on the one hand, we have big construction projects which we're not working on. We are working on small scale, low cost measures that can contribute, if widespread in the territory, to give important results. How do we do it? Well, we work with a very participatory approach, as I said, which involves all the main stakeholders of the community, starting from the administrators, the citizens, technicians, professionals like surveyors, like architects, agronomists and so forth. We work with school, we work with teachers, we work with farmers. So all of this effort is aimed at spreading this small scale measures I was talking about before. Just to give you an idea of what these measures are, they are, for example, green roofs, rain gardens, retention tanks, porous pavements, water harvestings, and so forth. They have all one thing is common. They mimic what the nature used to do before we intervene by waterproofing it, by soil sealing the nature, by cementing the nature. And they all have one thing is common, that is the function of collecting water, retaining water, and infiltrating water in the aquifers. This has a twofold, let's say, a twofold benefit. On the one hand, it reduces the risk of floods and infiltrates water in the aquifers. And the second one is the fact that this measures clean water. So they infiltrate clean water thanks to the filters we apply and thanks to the function of the natural function of the plants that are present in all the interventions. Beware in numbers. We have, as I said, one challenge, which is to activate a participatory process to improve the safety and the resilience of the territory. We perform 7 concrete natural water retention measures in the territory, which have, on the one hand, hydraulic and technical goals or purposes, but also didactical goals. We implement more than 20 actions. Many of them are on the communication side. We have been working for some time now. We started in September 2018. We will be working for 46 months and we'll finish in June 2022. We work on 3 levels of intervention, as I said. We start in the province of Vicenza, in the Alto Vicentino area. We then try to spread and to export what we consider a virtuous model at the national level and at the European level, with 6 partners that are daily committed to the implementation of the project. I'm close to conclude my presentation, but I just wanted to give you an idea, a more concrete idea of what we do in terms of activities. Of course, we, as I said, perform natural water retention interventions. We make them, we build them. At the same time, we also try to promote and facilitate their diffusion by taking out of the equation the most important obstacles that somehow hinder the implementation and the adoption of this and the diffusion. We do information and awareness with conferences, with laboratories, workshops involving citizens, involving all the community. We activated a participatory process to integrate existing municipality or local building codes with these natural water retention measures with some incentives. And we are also working with the whole community to establish a territorial action plan for hydraulic resilience and hydraulic safety. We also support citizens in the sense that we activated a help desk that gives information on natural water retention measures for those who are interested in adopting them, and we organize purchasing groups to make them more affordable. We train professionals, we train technicians, we train administrators, farmers. We talk with school, so education. We have visits from schools, we go into the schools, and of course we do network at the national level and the European level with exchange of practices, with study visits, which will soon happen. So that's the gist of it. That's pretty much what we are doing. I hope it was quite clear. We are very committed to what we're doing, and we hope to be able to give our part to contribute to achieve what the goals I mentioned before are about. I'll just close with a very quick quote, which is, "We are the first generation to feel the impact of climate change and the last generation that can do something about it." So this is, of course, this stresses the challenge that we have in front of us, but I'm sure that we'll by being here, by being very committed as we all are, we will be ready and able to take this challenge on. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Antonio. We decided to wait a minute for the last presentation, which is about funding opportunities for SDGs, since we think that there were quite a lot of input so far. And so if you want to intervene now, and then we will do the last presentation and have another round of questions. Alessandro Distante was like he wants to intervene and to say a few words, so maybe we can activate his microphone.
Okay, buongiorno a tutti. Good morning to everybody. I'm calling from Mesagne, Hisben, which is a biomedical institute that has somewhat of the three major points that you described at the beginning in the first lecture of Sustainable Development Goals, as we do work with the universal concepts, research, education, and patient care or services for the health. And then we have a multi-stakeholder institution. ISBEM has about 40 stakeholders, let's say is a non-profit social enterprise. And also we are localized in southern, in the Mediterranean area, which is in Puglia, but we have connections somewhere, and let's say in very, very different countries in the world. So I want to tell that relative to the first project that you described, I think that we can act here as an amplifier of this project because the project is already completed. I'm in a Parfait project, although I know that there is some other project planned by ALDA in the near future, and we're trying to help ALDA to find some partners here, like the Brindisi municipality and so on. But specifically, relative to the Beware project dealing with the water, I think that might be interesting, at least for, as I see it, to have a specific interaction with the leaders of this project, because not only we have some competencies in the world that we practice, but there is a fantastic publication with a lot of best practices described in this publication, named Puglia Siticulosa, which means Puglia, thirsty Puglia, Apulia. Puglia Siticulosa is a definition given by the poet Orazio Flacco when he crossed Puglia going from Rome to Greece. And this book describes a variety of methods to preserve, to collect and preserve water. Just to give you an idea, in Apulia, there are still now around the center of many cities, big cisterns, containers, let's say underground containers, cisterne, with a huge capacity to collect water, and people were of course permitted to use this water when they were in need and so on. Not only, but there are some historical points like stones in which is engraved a sentence like those who will make the water dirty will be will be punished with cutting their hands. Just to give you an idea how important was the issue. Anyhow, so just to tell you that not only to compliment you on the having focused this project, this topic, and specifically Antonio De Martin and all the other leaders, but if we could, since the project, from what I understood from ALDA officers, this project will last for other 2 years about. Might be interesting to find a way to be included in this project. I don't know how, but this can be in some way seen together, and then try to bring the experience of this region that again is depicted and well described in a book that has been written by Carmelo Formica, who is a scholar of outstanding level that is from this region. That's what I want to tell you.
Thanks a lot, Alessandro, for your intervention. I know that in the Beware project there are several opportunities to collaborate. For instance, they have a community of interest and other actions that like other stakeholders that are not in the consortium can contribute in. But I will leave the floor to Antonio to provide you some more information, and then of course we can put you in touch directly with him and with Marta, that is our project manager in charge of the project for ALDA, so that we can see how to collaborate. But I will leave the floor to Antonio.
Many thanks for your intervention. It was very useful, and as Sofia mentioned, we are always looking forward to having interaction with the territory, with those who operate daily on specific issues that are close to the project, in order to create network and potentially also opportunities of collaboration when it comes to trainings, when it comes to participation into certain activities or exchange of practices. So this is 100% in line what we are committed to do, and what we have been doing for some time now. We have this community of interest that probably Sofia mentioned before, which is a community, a network of people, and especially entities, organizations that are interested in following and taking part into the project. I took note also of the publication you mentioned, and I'd suggest we keep in touch, we exchange our contacts in order to discuss more in details what the possibilities out there are for us to collaborate. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Antonio. So I would go on with the last presentation. So I would leave the floor to Anna Ditta, that is working in the Resources and Development and Resources unit of ALDA. So in the unit where the projects are made, are written and are created. And Anna will tell us more about funding opportunities related to SDGs at the European level. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sofia. Hello, everybody. So, first of all, I would like to start by asking you a question. If you have an idea of which kind of funding sources, funding opportunities, funding programs are available within the European Union budget to fund sustainable development goals. Some of you have experience with projects, with programs. So
I can see there is an Erasmus Plus popping in the field of youth.
Oh yeah, somebody is saying Horizon 2020. Yes. Okay, I don't know where they are saying Erasmus, but yes. Okay. Oh yeah, Erasmus. Yeah. In the field of youth, 7th of May. Yeah, exactly. That deadline too. Yeah, fantastic. For engaging youngsters in SDGs. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah, this was just to have a bit of an interaction with you. Yeah. So, okay. The funding programs for the SDGs in the current programming period, you know that the current programming period runs since 2014 and up to 2020. And which are they? Everywhere. So First of all, we could say that there is a dedicated program to the SDGs, if we might call it in this way. It's the DEAR program, the Development, Education and Awareness Raising, Supporting Global Change. So this program was a very, very, very big and interesting program dealing with the Sustainable Development Goals, encompassing all its elements, let's say, so the 3 different components: the economic component, the social component, the environmental component. And this program respects the multi-stakeholder approach that Sofia was telling you about this morning. So in this type of program, which aims exactly to inform, to raise awareness about development and to educate about development. So who are the stakeholders involved? Who are the target groups? So the civil society organizations, the local authorities, schools, because we are talking about education, but we are not talking about education in school, but also in the non-formal settings. So NGOs, academia, and last but not least, the profit sector, because the profit sector can work in a sustainable way it can work in the same, it can work to improve sustainable development, so contributing to the economic component of sustainability. So this is a bit the idea that underlies the program DEAR. 4 huge calls, like calls worth €1 million, were launched throughout these 7 years, and ALDA was involved. It is still involved, but we can mention one major project that ALDA was carrying out, which is the ladder project that ran for 3 years under and funded by the DEAR program, and Sofia was the project manager of that project. She can tell you more maybe in a separate moment, because now we don't have time. But this project was huge, was a super interesting experiment for us, encompassing 27 partners around the topics of awareness raising about the topic of development, education. And as Sofia was saying this morning about the different principles of the SDGs, contrary to the Millennium Development Goals, the SDGs are focused also on developed countries. In fact, the eligible countries, the target countries touched by this DEAR program and our ladder project were the countries of the European Union. So we're not talking about Africa, Caribbean, Pacific. We are talking about European Union and its neighbors. This was the case of ladder project. So because the sustainable development is a matter that touches everybody and each one of us. So it doesn't matter if you live in a developed or underdeveloped country. So in this sense, we are all responsible for this type of changes, and DEAR was precisely addressing the most developed countries in the European Union. So this is, if I may say, this was a dedicated program to the SDGs, because it touched a bit of all of them. But this is not the only one, as you suggested too. We have many others. Why? Because the SDGs are a cross-cutting topic in all the other current EU programs. So you correctly mentioned Erasmus Plus, which targets not only youth, but also the world of vocational and educational training, the world of education, so schools, the adult education. So it touches what is called the lifelong learning dimension of the learning. So, for example, addressing the SDG 4, quality education. But Erasmus is only one of these programs that touch the Sustainable Development Goals. And just to precise something, while under the DEAR program, so this program that I mentioned before, there are no longer calls available. The last was in 2018. and now the project funded are ongoing, Erasmus still has a couple of deadlines ahead before the closure of the current programming period at the end of 2020. So there are still opportunities to tackle with. One of you mentioned the next deadline of the 7th of May, which is addressed specifically to the strategic partnership in the field of youth. So it's key action 2 of Erasmus, precisely dedicated to youth. And at the end of April, there will be actually other deadlines regarding vocational and educational training and adult education. So there are still some opportunities that you might want to tackle, to use. But Erasmus Plus, then you suggested the Horizon 2020. So true. The third pillar of Horizon 2020 is called the societal challenges, and there is literally everything inside. So Horizon 2020 is the program for research and development. Research about what? About everything, like research on biology, research on social challenges like demography, like the urban sustainability. Everything is inside this program. And last round of call was on the 12th of March, but still some calls are available under this Horizon 2020, and many are the Sustainable Development Goals that are touched with that. So literally from clean energy to peace and justice, to sustainable cities and communities, to industry, innovation and infrastructure. So all of our SDGs are touched by this program. Then, for example, I'm just mentioning a few of them. We have the Creative Europe program, which encompasses media and culture, and these are also programs that touch sustainable development goals. Another example is Life Plus that Antonio told you about. I mean, Beware is funded by Life Plus. Life Plus is the program dedicated to environment and climate change. So what can I say? It touches SDGs 6, 7, 12, 13, 14, 15. So the environmental dimension is so much urgent and so much important. And you can clearly see that from the SDGs. But then we have COSME, the program for small and medium enterprises. You have AMIF, the Asylum, Migration and Integration Fund, that works for promoting the reduction of inequalities, the inclusion of migrants, so to promote well-being. So it tackled, for example, with SDG 10, with SDG 16. We have many other, like third countries programs. The Parfait project that Giulia presented is managed by DG DEFCO, which is the general direction that takes care of all the programs with the third countries with respect to the European Union. And SDGs are touched by many of these programs, going from peace, justice, and strong institutions to, like in the case of Parfait, SDG 5, gender equality, but also 4, quality education again, 1, no poverty. So there are many SDGs that are touched by a huge amount of European Union programs. For example, also the gender equality is a cross-cutting topic. So this, again, this SDG 5 is underlining all the programs. In all the guidelines of these programs, you can see that the applicants might take a proactive attitude towards gender equality and so on and so forth. So keep this in mind. In every program you have this dimension of the SDGs. But why do you think there is this huge dedication to SDGs? Because it's not, of course, a coincidence. Europe 2020, which is the strategy that the European Union decided to apply for its growth, reposes on 3 main pillars. smart growth, sustainable growth, inclusive growth. So on these 3 pillars, the whole 2014 and 2020 programming period has been built. And these priorities are perfectly coherent with the SDGs and the Agenda 2030. So let's not forget this. And beside these 3 pillars, the declination of the Europe 2020 strategy is declined, as I was saying, in 5 key areas. So employment, this reminds us of SDG 8, research and development, climate change and energy, education, poverty, and social exclusion. So SDGs are with us since a long time, let's say, so since the starting of this present programming period. Okay, so what will happen to the SDGs after the end of 2020? Because we have been speaking about the present, but what's going on in the future? You know that at the end of the year, the programming period will be closed, and a new programming period will be open from 2021 until 2027. So we know that our reference is the Agenda 2030. Yes, we know that the Agenda 2030, along with the definition of the SDGs, has been set in 2015 by the United Nations General Assembly, and intended to be achieved by 2030. So this is a United Nations goal. But the European Union aligned its policies and its programming framework with the Agenda 2030. So it means that 2030 Agenda is not only an objective of the United Nations, but also the European Union. In particular, EU has played a very active role throughout the process, and it's super committed to implement this agenda. And within the EU and with the development cooperation with partner countries, so these third countries around the world that are part of the universe of the development cooperation. So here I put a link with the communications of the European Commission and the different steps that the European Union took during these years, starting from 2016, to align itself with the 2030 agenda of the United Nations. So let's say that the new multi-annual financial framework 2021-2027 will be fully directed to pursue the Agenda 2030 and therefore the SDGs. This means one thing, that no matter what call for proposals you decide to apply to, but they will all be directed to pursue, if not achieve, the sustainable development goals stated in the Agenda 2030. So there is not one single program directed to the SDGs, but all of them will be directed to the SDGs. So I just give you a couple of figures about the provisional figures about the multi-annual financial framework 2021-2027. So these are provisionals because, as you know, negotiations are still going on about the setting up of the new financial framework, and with this pandemic emergency, it's very likely that everything will be postponed, and we don't know till when. But normally, the new programming period should be starting already in the first months of 2021. But honestly, it's early to say. Let's say that compared to the last programming period, this new program will have 109 billion of euros of budget more than the last programming period. So we have a budget of more than 1,000 billion euros, which still it's nothing if you compare it to the federal budget of the United States. So as you know, as you might know, the budget of the European Union is like the 1% of the GDP of all the European Union member states. So it's not that powerful in this sense. But these will be the 6 well, 6, 7, if we count also the administration side, of the 7, 6 boxes, let's say, chapters in which the budget is subdivided. I'm showing to you this to tell you where you will find the different SDGs, but I think you already understood. So in these chapters, we have single market, innovation, and digital, that, for instance, among the other things, we'll find the future Horizon Europe, which is basically the Horizon 2020. So research and development here. Cohesion and values. Under this chapter, we will have a lot regarding the Cohesion Fund, the European Regional Development Fund, which is very important for the territorial cooperation and for funding very specific actions for specific areas to promote their development with respect to other areas that are more developed. So that's why we call it Cohesion Fund, to have cohesion in the development, to reduce the disparities in development. Again, we will have Erasmus+. We will have the European Solidarity Corps, so that part of Erasmus Plus dedicated to youth mobility and growth. Then all related to justice, rights and values. So Daphne, which is a program for women fighting against violence, but also fighting against more wider gender inequalities. Equality and rights on many topics, like this program will fight against hate speech, cyberbullying, discrimination of minorities. That there's a big bunch of rights done inside here. Citizens' participation. So what we have now is the Europe for Citizens program, and it will be in this chapter. Creative Europe again. So let's remind cohesion and values will have lots of SDGs tackled. Natural resources and environment, agriculture and maritime policy, environment and climate action. So again, we find our LIFE program under that, the third chapter of the next programming period. Migration and border management. So here we have what we have now is the AMIF program. It will be under here. Security and defense, and neighborhood and the world. So all what we do concerning European Union as an actor for development. So all the programs with the neighborhood areas, the Mediterranean, the Eastern Partnership, the Western Balkans. Here will be the DR program. The future DR program will be managed under this chapter. Humanitarian aid, so here we have no poverty, zero hunger, for example. We will have several SDGs. And IPA, so the instrument for pre-accession, that works on the chapters of the acquis communautaire to prepare the Balkan countries for the accession in the European Union. So this tackle with the SDG 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. So, okay, this is just a table stating the increase of the budget compared to the past programming period. And so, what can I say? Looking forward to the approval, hopefully late in 2019, but most probably in 2020, hopefully in the very first part of the year. So this is it. I hope not to have been too long. And if you have questions, of course, we are all here. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Anna. Thanks for this presentation, which show that SDGs are everywhere. So we can open to questions. Yes.
Distante speaking, a brief question. Are you all waiting for proposals from the periphery as well? Are you in some way suggesting, enhancing, promote to go from bottom up some proposals that might be structured by you in a format that is European with all the principles that you described?
Well, this is, I will say that this is a methodology we apply to all our projects. We structure all of our projects in a bottom-up approach with the contribution of the partners. We do this all the time, and not only referring to the SDGs. So you might be willing to propose an idea, and we might discuss of the possibility to apply together to the most appropriate funding. I don't know if I responded to your question, Professor.
Is there a deadline for these for specific, or could you, might you please prepare a table saying for this call the deadline is this one, for this one is this other, in order to enhance the capacity that we can have from the periphery to make some proposals, hopefully decent proposals?
Yeah, we already do it. We have a monthly newsletters where we publish, and also the website, we publish all the calls out now that are interesting for ALDA and for its family. And so if you feel that there is one or more calls that are of your interest and that you think you could contribute to, you might write to Mark or to myself, and we might discuss about your ideas, sure.
Okay, thank you.
And thanks for being here, especially in this difficult moment. So thanks for being here, and wish you a nice lunch.